So a lot of quarterback conversation yesterday as we talked about ACC Media Day and Eli Holstein not getting an invitation to Charlotte, or Pitt deciding not to bring Eli Holstein to Charlotte, and kind of what that all meant in the context of everything, and whether there's jobs on the line or whatever it might be, a quarterback competition. But the more I thought about it throughout the day, I mean, I stopped thinking about the Media Day stuff because there was only so much you could say about it. I mean, it happened. We can try and read into it a little bit, and then we move on. But the more I was thinking about sort of the general topic, the quarterback topic, the more I'm wondering about Eli Holstein for this season, about what Pitt needs out of Eli Holstein and its starting quarterback this season, but also what your expectations are for Eli Holstein. And some of this is going to be a little bit I'm interested in your feedback. I guess is what I would say. I'm interested in your feedback here on YouTube comments and also on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. I'm interested in what your expectations are for Eli Holstein. Like, what do you think he's going to do? I obviously, it's what I think everybody knows what Pitt needs him to do, but what do you expect him to do? Who do you expect to see? Because the reality is, in 2024, when Eli Holstein was a first-year starter, playing as a redshirt freshman in a brand-new offense and all of that with a first-year offensive coordinator, he was very much up and down. And I think we've talked about this quite a bit. We've documented it we certainly documented it throughout the season. I think we've talked about it this offseason as well, that you really had a mixed bag of results from Eli Holstein when he was playing and healthy. And we talk about him being hurt and he missed time, and that obviously cost him, it cost Pitt. But even when he was healthy, it was a mixed bag. Even when the results were good, when in the 7-0 start, it was a mixed bag of performances from Eli Holstein. And so, I think there's two questions. One, it's just mostly one question. What do you expect from Eli Holstein this year? What are your expectations for him in 2025? Do you expect just a big leap forward, a giant step forward, picking up on all the things he did well in 2024? Do you expect something a little bit more up and down? Picking up on that level of his play from 2024 and maybe smoothing it out a little bit, but still having some steps forward, steps back? Or do you expect him to regress? And I think there's a school of thought out there that by the time the Cal game came around last year, defenses had sort of figured out Eli Holstein and figured out Cade Bell's offense. In which case, if you believe that to be the case, you could probably convince yourself that that's going to carry over to this year, that it's going to look more like that than the positive sides, and that defenses will have a pretty good idea of how to defend Holstein and how to defend this offense and this scheme in 2025, which is going to make for a pretty long year for everybody. So what are your expectations for Eli Holstein this year? What are your expectations for Pitt's quarterback play this year? And by extension, it's a conversation about your expectations for the offense, which we can get into today, but hopefully I can try and save some of that for another podcast because, we need a lot of topics around here. But what are your expectations for Eli Holstein and Pitt's quarterback in 2025? Let's talk about that here on the Tuesday edition of The Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, it's the Tuesday edition of The Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. You see the website below, Panther-Lair.com. It's the Pitt site on the 24/7 Sports Network, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Pitt football, Pitt basketball, Pitt recruiting, Pitt transfer portal, Pitt all that stuff. You find it at Panther-Lair.com and message boards to talk with other Pitt fans about everything that's going on in the world of Pitt sports. You want to hang out with other Pitt fans online? I think this is the best community of Pitt fans you're going to find online. So go hang out there, Panther-Lair.com. And, of course, our YouTube channel right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, where you can get all of our Pitt video content. We have our daily morning Pitt videos like this one. We have our weekly live show that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30. We have post-game shows, press conferences, interviews, all kinds of stuff for you to consume at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So do me a favor, like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and that way you won't miss any of our Pitt video content. So on the topic of Eli Holstein, Pitt's in a bit of a unique position as it relates to the rest of the ACC in terms of having a starting quarterback returning. As a matter of fact, I was talking yesterday about all the teams that are bringing quarterbacks to ACC Media Days and all the teams that aren't. 17 teams in the conference. 4 of them are not bringing quarterbacks to ACC Media Day. Pitt's one of them. The other 3, Stanford, Wake Forest, Boston College. All 3 of those teams do not return their starting quarterbacks. They have guys who transferred. Stanford's quarterback from last year transferred to Auburn. Wake Forest quarterback graduated, and Boston College's quarterback transferred to Florida State, which is interesting. And then there are 8 teams that are bringing transfer quarterbacks to ACC Media Day. And that leaves 5 other teams in the conference that are returning their starters at quarterback. You could run down the list. You probably know which teams are bringing guys back. But Georgia Tech and Clemson, and Virginia Tech, right? With all these SMU, a bunch of these schools. Not that many though. In terms of 17 team conference, and only 6 of them are returning their starting quarterback from a year ago. Pitt being one of those 6. That is interesting in and of itself. 8 teams are going to be running out a transfer starter. Probably more than that. It could be as many as 11 teams will run out of transfer, but 11 teams are going to have brand new starting quarterbacks in 2025, and that should be a positive for those teams that are returning their starting quarterbacks. For the most part, I think you probably would look at these different teams and say, yeah, they all like the guy that they have. I think SMU very much likes its quarterback. Clemson very much likes its quarterback. Virginia Tech very much likes its quarterback. Trying to think off the top of my head, who are the other 3 teams? I've got the list of all the schools that are bringing transfers to Media Day. NC State, I think, probably likes their quarterback a good deal. Georgia Tech likes its guy, so on and so forth. So Pitt's in what should be a positive position in returning its starting quarterback. But this is where the whole kind of feedback side comes in, because I get a weird vibe from Pitt fans that there's not 100% confidence in Eli Holstein returning to the form that he showed at various points over the course of last season, like the final 20 minutes of the Cincinnati game, or some portions of the West Virginia game, or the most of the North Carolina game. And maybe, the first drive against Louisville until the very last play of that drive, the interception in the end zone. I feel like Pitt fans are maybe a little mixed right now on what their expectations are for Eli Holstein. I think there's a lot of confidence and optimism, but the fact that he was inconsistent last year, and then the fact that he really hasn't played a full game since the Syracuse game, and then you throw in the fact that, like we said yesterday, that there were some concerning reports about his performance in spring camp, that maybe he wasn't the best quarterback in spring camp, albeit hampered by continued recovery from injury. I think all of that is sort of conspired to, from what I sense, make Pitt fans a little bit concerned about Eli Holstein for this year. And I think it's, to some extent, it's understandable. Like I've said many times, watching the first 3 quarters basically of the Cincinnati game last year, I had real questions about it. You come out of the Kent State game, you say, okay, think this might be a pretty good quarterback. They might have got somebody. And then you go through that first half at Cincinnati, and he's awful. He was not good in that first half against Cincinnati in most of the third quarter. And so, and I distinctly remember thinking, all right, so much for that. Let's see what Nate Yarnell can do, because this guy isn't it. And then obviously he turned out to be it at the end of that game. He turned out to be it in, the end of the West Virginia game. He turned out to be it in the North Carolina game. And so you had some encouraging performances there. But I guess what's your confidence level in him going into 2025 and building on, those positive performances, those encouraging performances, and making those positive performances and encouraging performances the norm and the majority, and not the concerning inconsistency? And I don't know where I stand on this, because I think in a lot of respects there's a lot to like about Eli Holstein's game. I think he shows some really good skills at times. I think he's got a strong enough arm. I think he can put some zip on the ball, although he needs to watch on some of those out patterns. There's probably too many interceptions on those and near miss interceptions on those. He's got legs. He can move around. He can run. He can throw on the run. He can keep plays alive. I don't know how many designed runs you want to call for him, but he can make plays with his legs. And I think that's a big attribute for him. And then he's a big, tough, strong quarterback. You know what I mean? Like a Josh Allen mold quarterback, the kind of quarterback who, if somebody says online that, the coaches at his previous school were considering moving him to tight end, you kind of believe that. You buy into it. You're like, well, yeah, he kind of looks like a tight end. He is built like a tight end. You put him next to Gavin Bartholomew and you say, well, these guys, I can believe that they play the same position. And so I think those are all positives in his regard. I think he's tough. I think he's mentally tough. I think he wants to put the team on his back. I think he's capable of late game heroics, which he has shown, and that's good. But obvious statement here, but Pitt needs more than late game heroics in 2025. They need full game heroics from their quarterback, because Pitt, as much as any team, and every team is only going to go as far as their quarterback takes them, but I think Pitt is a unique position. I shouldn't say unique position, but Pitt is in a position this year where the quarterback is going to have to do a lot of the heavy lifting. Desmond Reed is great. I think he's going to play really well. I think he's going to do a lot of good things for Pitt this year and make a lot of plays just like he did a year ago. But some of these years where you've seen real standout performances from the quarterback at Pitt, like 2021 with Kenny Pickett, where Kenny Pickett was awesome. There's no question about it. But Kenny Pickett also had Jordan Addison, who was quite possibly awesomer. I think, you look at some of the better, more explosive, more eye-popping performances from quarterbacks in Pitt history, and there's usually a big-time playmaker or two out there who are helping get the work done. As it stands right now, Eli Holstein doesn't have that guy. Kenny Johnson can become that guy. I think we all believe he's capable of being that guy, but he has not been that guy yet. And maybe 2025 ends up being his breakout season. Pitt certainly needs that to be the case. But until that happens, Eli Holstein is going to have to carry the load. He's going to have to make the plays. He himself is going to have to elevate the offense. And that's always the case. The quarterback always has to elevate the offense. But in a different situation with maybe different playmakers around him, the quarterback doesn't have to shoulder as much of the load as it looks like Eli Holstein's going to have to shoulder here. So, that's part of this question too about the expectations is how much of that load can you put on Eli Holstein? Can he be consistent enough to carry a team through a game and not just manufacture, 20-point comebacks, which are great. You got to have those 20-point comebacks. You're going to have games where you fall behind by 2 scores, and you'd love to have that guy who can put the team on his back and carry him down the field. But you need it consistently throughout the game. And maybe if there's one thing Eli Holstein didn't really show, it was that. It was being that consistent player throughout the game. Now, I mentioned the Cincinnati and West Virginia games a bunch of times. Syracuse, he didn't really have to do anything, so it's a weird kind of game. But the Cal game, he was not consistent throughout the game. He was not very good in that game. The Virginia game, I'm fully convinced that if he had stayed in the game the whole time, he would have probably led them back to win that game. But he was not consistently good throughout the game, or else he could have staked them a bigger lead and given them a good chance to win. The Louisville game, he throws an interception on the first drive. There are very few examples, I think, from last season where Eli Holstein had that consistency all game long. The North Carolina game was probably the exception. I'm not counting Youngstown State or Kent State. So you need that from him when you go down to West Virginia. You need that from him when you're playing Louisville. You need that from him when you're going to Syracuse. You need that from him when you're hosting Miami in the finale. You're playing Boston College or one of these games. You need Eli Holstein to have that consistency, which is not something he has shown. And given the questions around his playmakers and the questions around this offense overall, you're going to need, Eli Holstein's going to have to be the star here. And if he can't be the star, he at least needs to be Nate Yarnell level unspectacularly fine, right? And then hope that the offensive scheme takes a step forward in Cade Bell's second year, that maybe the scheme can kind of elevate things. But that's a hard thing to rely on. the players should be the ones who are getting the job done and winning the games. And that's going to fall on Eli Holstein. And I'm pretty sure he can be pretty good. But kind of like with a few other guys we've talked about with this team, a few other important players, we just haven't really seen it on that consistent basis. So, I mean, what's your thought? What are your expectations for this? What is Eli Holstein going to do in 2025? We know what Pitt needs him to do. We know that if he can play at a really high level, Pitt can probably win a bunch of games. I mean, we've talked about the schedule. I don't think the schedule is crazy. I think the defense should be pretty good. I think the offensive line has a chance to hold up and be pretty solid, injuries notwithstanding. Desmond Reed is obviously awesome, but you're going to need Eli Holstein to elevate. Because if he does, maybe this team can go out and win 9-10 games. If he doesn't, then you get into that other question we've talked about from time to time, particularly related to that Cincinnati game last year where you're watching that game saying this guy should probably be pulled. Well, if he plays like that again this year, I think he will be pulled. I don't know how long the leash will be this year. I'm not sure that the coaches view as much separation between 1 and 2 in the quarterback room this year as they did last year. I think there was enough separation viewed in last year's quarterback room that they felt confident in keeping Eli Holstein out there. Whereas this year, maybe a bit of a quicker hook, a bit of a shorter leash. So what's your expectations? What do you think Eli Holstein's going to do this year? I think he's capable of a 3,000-yard season and 30 touchdowns, but I'm not entirely convinced that he's going to do it because there's enough of those questionable areas from last season, even if we can dismiss them as being a first-year starter in a brand-new offense. There's enough of those questionable areas and questionable decisions and challenges with facing certain types of defenses that I'm not entirely ready to pencil him in for 3,000 and 30. 3,000 yards and 30 touchdowns just quite yet. Are you? This might be one of the biggest questions of the season is what you expect Eli Holstein to do and what Eli Holstein ultimately does. But what's your thoughts? Share it in the comments here on YouTube or on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. Panther-Lair.com. We know what Pitt needs from Eli Holstein, but what do you expect from Eli Holstein? Go on the Between Fifth and Forbes message board. And while you're there, you can also post your question for this week's mailbag. We'll have our thread up today. Submit your questions. We'll answer as many as we can in Friday's mailbag right here on the Morning Pit. So thanks for tuning in today. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Don't forget we have the live show tomorrow night. So enjoy your Tuesday. We'll be back tomorrow for another Morning Pit right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.